get to beer. I don't have any pictures for you to see. I know pictures of beer are fun. But we will get to that later. Well, first, I want to tell you a story which I think is emblematic of the American food culture. And what I'm here to talk about today is not so much the nuts and bolts. I want to talk about the way we think about food and how we've gotten to where we are now and how we get out. Now, about 15 years ago, me and my friend Brandon hopped in a car and we're going to drive down south. And we were on a road trip, good old-fashioned road trip, the kind you see in a movie. And one day on our way back up, going through Virginia, we saw this diner. We say, that looks wonderful. Beautiful old diner. The cows are in the fields. And we sit down in there and we order pancakes. And now, we didn't expect necessarily real maple syrup. But when the pancakes came, they brought this pat of goo, of yellow goo. You've seen it, with a little piece of wax paper on it. And we asked her, well, don't you have any butter? And she said, well, that is butter. And we said politely, no, that's margarine. And she'd been friendly before. But now she wasn't so friendly. And she said, well, that's the only butter we have. And it came to me, at least at the time, that it seemed the closer you got to cows, the further you got from butter. And so what I'm talking about today is memory. Now, many of you have seen the film The Matrix, 1999, Keanu Reeves playing himself. And it posits a world where there is an overlay over the entire world and everyone is living in a dream life created by machines. And there's a great scene where people are talking about, well, they've woken up from this dream life and all their memories of food are not real. And what I didn't realize when I was growing up is that the supermarket is the Matrix. When you walk in and you feel somewhat uneasy and you don't know what it is that's wrong, and the problem is that the stuff that's on the shelf that says that it's food is not food. Now, I grew up in the 70s, so we all know the average supermarket loaf of white bread. And it came to me one day that this bread, who's made a loaf of bread at home? Okay, how long does a loaf of bread stay fresh? 1 day, 2 days? Okay, this is my point. A loaf of bread does not stay fresh in a bag for 2 weeks. The thing in the bag at the supermarket is not bread. It does not have any bread attributes. It does not look like bread, smell like bread, act like bread. You can't roll bread into a marble and flick it across the road. Blindingly white, all the holes are the same. It in fact has no bread attributes. I wondered when I was a kid, why did they call it a crust when it wasn't crusty? I didn't realize that it was sprayed on food coloring. The thing was baked, steamed rather than being baked. So what they've created now for us are food facsimiles. Things that are representations of stuff that we knew, but are not real anymore. You've seen this commercial. Our slices are 70% milk. Our competitors' slices are only 35% milk. Cheese is 100% milk. So this is actually your advertisement that this food is 70% real. That's an ad. That's how much of your memory they want to remove. Now, when I was a kid, I grew corn in my backyard. I only had about 18 plants, but that was part of my ritual of spring and summer, was growing those corn plants. And so I had an idea what was real, but in the 70s, somehow the food system went to remove it. And it's funny when we think of, real, as they said in the Matrix, real. What is real? Real depends upon where you expected things came from. Margarine started off as fake butter back in the 20s. Then, during the 70s, margarine became real margarine because the point of margarine was that it was supposedly better for you because it wasn't butter. Now it's real margarine. We're saying it doesn't come from cows and that's why it's good. Then everybody discovered that maybe butter was actually better for you, and margarine became fake butter again, which is why you don't hear about it so much anymore. Soy milk was never fake milk. We can talk about soy, but soy milk was never fake milk because the point of soy milk is that no cows are involved. You can have a lollipop and it can be red, but it can't be fake red. Red is a color. What you have is fake redness. Because you had an expectation in your mind that maybe the red came from cherries. And that is the difference. And if you can remove memory, if you can remove provenance, that is the way the food system seeks profit. By removing your entire human memory of what food is supposed to be. So what we're doing basically, in what we're doing in beer, what we're doing in food, is a rebuilding of our overall memory. Now, my connection, if you like, to this movement comes from my days with Slow Food. And I was one of the founders of Slow Food USA, together with Alice Waters and Carlo Petrini and Renato Sardo and Patrick Martins, who now runs Heritage Foods, and a number of other great individuals. And Carlo's axiom always was, if nobody's grandmother recognizes it, it's not food. So we need to do a lot of what Tanya's doing, a lot of other people are doing in the room, teaching kids how to rebuild memories. I think there's something very ironic about the fact that I, a relatively rich person, like all of my friends, relatively rich people, can take $8 worth of produce and turn it into 2 spectacular meals for 4 people. Poor people used to know how to do that. The great French tradition of food is based on poverty. Take everything, throw nothing out, use everything, make stocks. Nobody throws bones out in my house. They know better. The stock pot's already going before the guests leave. Why is it? How do we have a situation where people who can actually afford to go out and buy whatever they want are the people who know how to cook? What people in this room are doing with things like the Edible Schoolyard program are the most important parts of rebuilding human memory. So, when you see the rise of something like craft beer, well, beer is one of those things that was a progenitor of human civilization. People believe that we went from a hunter-gatherer existence to a settled agricultural existence so we could grow enough grain to make beer, which was one of the major, wonderful, magical things in life, but also provided a lot of calories to early humans. And we turned it, over time, into a ghost in a can by removing the memory of what beer was. So when you see craft beer in the supermarket, people say, oh, it's a trend, it's a fad. No, it is exactly the opposite. It is a return to normality. The weird thing was to have one beer for 300 million people that tastes like nothing. That is the Matrix. To remove diversity, to remove complexity from everything, that is the Matrix that we were talking about. Now, at Brooklyn Brewery, we are obviously making beer in a city, but we were the first 100% wind-powered building in New York City. We tried through community energy, great folks. Last year, we made a beer for the High Line where we used more than 50% New York State ingredients, which was fun. Right now we have a new beer out called Mary's Maple Porter. Leslie likes it. Our quality control director spent 30 years at Anheuser-Busch before we rescued her. Her family has 500 acres of maple trees in upstate New York, so we're using her maple syrup to make this beer. A lot of people say that we don't have time to cook. We don't have time to cook. We don't have time to spend time with our families around the table. You're lying. Most of you are lying to yourselves. It is not possible that we can watch more television than anybody in the entire world and not have time to cook and sit down with our families. It's not possible. Do the math. I'm not saying that on an individual basis people aren't struggling. But, you know, if you have time to watch 2 hours of TV every day and you're saying you don't have time to cook, something's wrong with life. I just want to say that when I was growing up, when I grew up out in Queens, Hollis, Queens, the smell of warm soil in the springtime was a big part of my life. It was what spring was. You remember in the film The Lord of the Rings, the character Gollum, who turns into a monster over time, talks about forgetting the sound of trees and the smell of bread. Because once you forget those things, you're not human anymore. When you don't know the smell of warm soil, you have to question whether you are human anymore. And part of what everybody here is working about is regaining our memory of soil, regaining that smell in our hearts. And at the end of the middle of the matrix, they give a choice. If you take the blue pill, you go back to your life as you knew it, back into the matrix, and you live your dream life. Or you can take the red pill, which brings knowledge, and knowledge is going to be difficult and painful, and it goes down the rabbit hole, and you don't know where it goes. Humanity is the red pill, you know, and we all need to take that red pill and follow that, no matter how difficult it is, to get back to being human. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very inspirational, Garrett. Thank you so much. And I did read actually your food talk is The Matrix, Reality, Facsimile, Technology, and the Food Culture, which I thought would be very interesting. What's the difference between a facsimile and a facsimile?